It began with a single sentence that detonated like a grenade. On live television, Bill Clinton leaned toward Jasmine Crockett. His smile curled in that old, practiced way, and dropped the line that no one expected. "You don't belong on this stage, Jasmine. You're just a loudmouth with no brains." The audience gasped, the air crackled, and in the very first seconds of this broadcast, millions watching at home knew they weren't witnessing an ordinary debate. They were watching a war ignite. Clinton, a man who had built decades of political weight, seemed convinced his legacy gave him the authority to crush anyone daring to oppose him. But Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, her eyes narrowed, her hand slammed the podium, and she locked onto him with the fire of someone who had been underestimated for far too long. For the viewers, that opening insult wasn't just shocking, it was revealing. It peeled back the polished mask of a former president, showing the arrogance beneath, the belief that he could still intimidate, still humiliate. The tension was instant. The studio cameras zoomed in on Crockett's face, catching the split-second decision that changed everything. She wasn't going to let it slide. She wasn't going to play safe. She leaned forward, voice steady but sharp, and with just a few words promised a reckoning. "If you think I'm just noise, Mr. Clinton, then get ready. Because I've got truth louder than your lies." The crowd erupted, some cheering, others stunned into silence. What had begun as a verbal swipe now carried the scent of something bigger: scandal, revelation, exposure. This was no longer a debate. It was the beginning of an all-out collision between old power and new fire, between a politician who thought he had seen it all and a woman determined to show him and the entire country that his time of unchecked dominance was over. The stage wasn't just lit by studio lights anymore. It was burning with the promise of a showdown that would leave scars on reputations and shake faith in what the public thought they knew about one of America's most enduring figures. The fallout from Clinton's words spread like wildfire. Social media was already ablaze. Hashtags trended within minutes. As Crockett vs. Clinton, Hasher loudmouth or leader. Clips of his insult replayed endlessly, the shock on the faces of the moderators, the gasp from the front row, the split second where Jasmine's jaw tightened. But inside the hall, the tension only grew heavier. Clinton thought he had seized control. He leaned back, satisfied, sipping from his glass of water as if he had just ended the night with one punch. Yet, the reality was far different. The insult was not a knockout. It was the spark of a blaze he could no longer contain. Crockett, standing tall at her podium, didn't raise her voice right away. She let the silence stretch, letting the weight of his arrogance linger. The cameras caught her calm exterior, but anyone who has ever watched her in action knew that silence meant preparation. She was gathering her strike. Then, in measured tones, she began. "It's always the same with men who believe their history excuses their hypocrisy," she said, her words crisp, each syllable slicing through the room. "You think your past achievements allow you to insult women, dismiss new voices, and bully your way to the finish line. But America has moved on. You just don't realize it yet." The crowd buzzed, a mixture of approval and discomfort. Clinton adjusted his tie, visibly annoyed, but Crockett wasn't done. She leaned closer to her mic, voice rising with conviction. "If being a loudmouth means refusing to let corruption and entitlement silence me, then I'll embrace that label, because the truth doesn't whisper, it roars." The audience erupted, and even some of Clinton's longtime supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. In that moment, the balance shifted. Clinton's smirk faded. He had wanted to embarrass her. Instead, he had given her the opening to turn the entire room against him. Clinton tried to cut her off, waving dismissively at the moderators as if her words weren't worth the audience's time. "Spare me the lecture," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "You wouldn't know what it means to actually lead. Talking louder doesn't make you smarter, it just makes you tiresome." The line drew forced laughter from a handful of his allies, but the sound fell flat in the hall. The cameras panned across the crowd, uneasy faces, crossed arms, whispers. Clinton was digging himself deeper without realizing it. Crockett leaned forward, eyes locked on him, and delivered her counterpunch. "You know what's truly tiresome, Mr. Clinton? Watching men who once held power pretend that their legacy entitles them to insult and demean every voice that challenges them. You confuse leadership with dominance, but let me remind you, intimidation doesn't equal intelligence, and belittling doesn't erase the truth." The crowd roared. Viewers online clipped the moment instantly, blasting it across platforms. Commentators tweeted, "Crockett just ended Clinton's act in 30 seconds flat." Hashtags shifted again. "Crockett destroys. Clinton, not truth roars." Clinton's face reddened. He tried another jab. "You think fiery speeches make up for lack of experience? This isn't a game for amateurs." But Crockett, unfazed, shot back. "Experience without accountability is just corruption with a resume. America has seen enough of that." Gasps filled the room. The words hung in the air like a lightning strike. Clinton's smirk disappeared, replaced by tight-lipped irritation. He adjusted his notes, shuffled in his seat, searching for a comeback. Yet the silence from his corner spoke volumes. By now, even skeptical viewers watching at home felt the shift. What was meant to be Clinton's moment of dominance had turned into a stage where Jasmine Crockett displayed unshakable strength. And for the first time that evening, Clinton looked like the one who didn't belong. The atmosphere inside the hall was now electric, almost suffocating with anticipation. Clinton leaned closer to the microphone, his voice rising as he tried to reclaim the narrative. "You act like some truth-teller, Congresswoman, but let's be real. You're nothing more than a performer. Anger isn't a strategy, yelling isn't a solution, and insults don't equal intellect. You may get applause from Twitter, but real politics? That's still above your head." His words dripped with disdain, his hand slicing the air in dismissive gestures, as though cutting her down with every movement. But Crockett didn't flinch. She slowly stood, pushing her chair back deliberately, letting the moment stretch. "Above my head?" she asked, her tone sharp yet controlled. "What's really above my head, Mr. Clinton, are the shady deals, the backroom compromises, and the endless excuses that leaders like you piled on this country for decades. The problem isn't that I'm loud. The problem is that I'm not willing to be quiet about the corruption you helped normalize." The audience erupted again, this time with chants of, "Tell it! Tell it!" A wave of energy swept through the room. Social media feeds exploded with clips captioned, "Crockett versus Clinton, fire meets fury." Within minutes, the hashtag Crockett clapback was trending worldwide. Clinton, visibly shaken, tried to interject. "Corruption, Abobo? You're throwing words around recklessly. I've spent my career building bridges, negotiating peace, strengthening America's image abroad." Crockett cut him off like a hammer striking steel. "Strengthening America's image or strengthening your own legacy while ignoring the voices at home? Don't lecture me about peace when communities are still recovering from policies you never cared to fix. Don't lecture me about leadership when women in this country had to fight tooth and nail against decisions your administration defended. You're not a bridge. You're a blockade." The audience gasped and then broke into cheers that shook the chamber walls. Clinton's lips tightened, his jaw flexing as he realized the ground beneath him was slipping. He looked down at his notes, flipping pages aimlessly, but the damage was clear. Crockett had turned the debate into a courtroom, and Clinton was the defendant without a defense. By this point, the debate no longer felt like a structured political exchange. It had become a duel, raw and personal. Clinton, clearly rattled, leaned forward on the podium, his voice dripping with forced calm. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, each word carefully measured. "It's easy to throw stones when you've never carried the weight of the Oval Office on your shoulders. You'll understand someday that compromise isn't corruption. It's survival." His tone tried to project wisdom, but the slight tremor betrayed the weakness behind it. Crockett's eyes narrowed. She didn't hesitate. "Survival for who, Mr. Clinton? For the American people? Or for the political elite who made careers out of cutting deals in smoky backrooms while ignoring the struggles outside these walls?" Her words rang through the chamber like a gavel strike, drawing immediate applause. The crowd, already leaning in, erupted again, their voices rising into chants of, "Speak truth! Speak truth!" She pressed on, not letting the energy slip. "You sat in that chair with the power to change lives, and what did you do? You told millions to wait, to settle, to compromise, but waiting doesn't fill empty stomachs. Compromise doesn't save families crushed by poverty, and survival doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the people who keep fighting, even when leaders like you fail them." Clinton tried to counter with a practiced smile, but his response was drowned out by the audience. The sound of people clapping, stomping, and shouting shook the room. His face reddened, frustration breaking through his polished exterior. He banged his hand on the podium, demanding, "Let me finish!" But the optics had already shifted. Crockett stood tall, her finger pointing at him like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. "You can't finish because your time is finished. The people are done with excuses. They're done with recycled speeches about survival. This isn't about your legacy. It's about accountability." The roar that followed was deafening. Cameras zoomed in on Clinton's strained expression, capturing the exact moment he realized he had lost control of the stage. Online, viewers clipped the exchange into viral snippets, flooding timelines with captions like "Clinton silenced live" and "Crockett destroys the establishment." The debate had shifted permanently. Clinton had underestimated his opponent, and Crockett had seized the narrative with an iron grip. The atmosphere in the debate hall had shifted from tense to electric. Clinton tried to reclaim ground, raising his hand in a familiar gesture of authority. "Let's be serious," he began, his voice low but sharp. "You speak as if leadership is some purity contest. The world doesn't bend to idealism. Real leaders make sacrifices, tough choices that people like you can't even begin to understand." Crockett didn't flinch. She leaned into the microphone, her voice cutting through the noise with surgical precision. "Sacrifices? You mean selling out the people for backroom deals? You mean bowing to lobbyists while families can't afford health care or education? That's not sacrifice, Mr. Clinton. That's betrayal." Gasps spread through the audience, followed by thunderous applause. Viewers at home froze, replaying the line over and over on live streams. Clinton's face darkened. For years, his ability to turn criticism into charm had saved him, but this time the crowd wasn't laughing. Trying to regain his footing, Clinton fired back. "You think you're the first to call me corrupt? I've stood in front of world leaders, Congress, and the American people. I've been accused of everything under the sun, and I'm still here. Why? Because people know I did what needed to be done." Crockett's reply landed like a hammer. "You're still here because the system protects people like you. But tonight, you're standing in front of the people, and they're not buying the excuses anymore. Survival politics ends now." The audience exploded. Signs waved in the air, phones shot up to capture every second. Hashtags like # Clinton exposed and # Crockett strikes trended instantly on Twitter. Clinton raised his voice above the roar, but his words were swallowed by chants of truth, truth, truth. Cameras zoomed in on Crockett, who stood calm and unyielding, her presence dominating the stage. She wasn't just fighting Clinton, she was dismantling decades of establishment politics in front of a live national audience. For the first time that night, Clinton looked small. The debate hall reached a fever pitch. Clinton, visibly rattled, adjusted his tie and tried once more to project calm authority. "You've had your say, Congresswoman," he sneered. "But politics isn't a shouting match. It's about compromise, about knowing your place." Crockett seized the moment. Her eyes locked on him with laser focus as she delivered her final blow. "Knowing my place? My place is here, exposing lies, defending the truth, and reminding America that the old guard no longer decides our future. We do. And if that makes you uncomfortable, Mr. Clinton, then maybe it's time you finally step aside." The audience erupted, some rising to their feet, clapping and cheering as if witnessing history unfold. Viewers across the country were glued to their screens, flooding social media with fiery reactions. Memes, clips, and quotes spread like wildfire. "Step aside, Mr. Clinton," became the phrase of the night. Clinton forced a smile, but his eyes betrayed the truth. He had been cornered, dismantled, and humiliated in front of millions. His voice cracked as he attempted a rebuttal, but the sound was drowned by chants echoing through the auditorium. "Crockett! Crockett! Crockett!" The camera panned slowly, capturing Crockett standing tall, unshaken, the symbol of a new political energy. Commentators whispered that this moment could mark the end of one era and the start of another. And then, as the lights dimmed and the broadcast prepared to cut away, Crockett leaned forward with one last line aimed not just at Clinton, but at the nation. "If you want the truth, if you want leaders who put people before power, you just witnessed it. Don't let this be the last time." The screen faded, but not before a message to viewers. Subscribe. Stay tuned. More truths, more conflicts, more revelations are coming. The stage was set. The movement had begun. And America was watching.